Hi, I'm Bart Jungens from bitcom.be, and in this video we will take a look together at the user interface of an HPE SimpliVity HCI solution. We're going to do this by starting with the main interface, which is VMware vCenter, not more, not less. And by using a plugin, we can drill down to the federation level, go further to the cluster, to the host, and to the virtual machine operations. That's what we're going to do. Of course, we're going to take a look as well at one of the unique features of that HPE SimpliVity solution, which is that built-in deduplication and compression. And so we're going to see together what's the impact on the storage capacity and the efficiency of the platform. How do we going to do that? Well, by doing some virtual machine operations. So we're going to clone a virtual machine by using templates. We're going to make backups. We're going to delete data. We're going to do restores. And so we're going to take a look if it is actually possible, like HPE says, that you can restore a virtual machine of 1 terabyte of data and that you can restore it in less than 1 minute. So are you ready? Let's get started. So this is the VMware vCenter user interface. That's the one that we're going to use for this SimpliVity UI walkthrough. So everything will be happening through that SimpliVity plugin interface, which you can see here. So that SimpliVity plugin for vSphere client that is installed. And so you can see it effectively as well. When you go to that top menu item at the bottom, you will see SimpliVity Federation. So the federation state shows you here how it goes with your virtual appliance status, the info site integration. Quite important here is the number of failed backups, which is apparently 0. Very good here. And you also have some cluster space information. Also in the federation page, you can find here more information about the backup policies. Backup policies are like backup jobs. And in a backup policy, you define of how many copies, how many backups of a virtual machine that we're going to make and maintain in this cluster, maybe other clusters, maybe on an external store once appliance, or maybe even with HPE Cloud Volume. So this is the place where you're going to define this inside the backup policies in the HPE SimpliVity Federation. Now, of course, there are some other places as well where you can see the integration of that plugin. So in my case here, I have two clusters. I have a local cluster and a remote cluster, which can be another place in town, another building, another city, maybe even another country. So a second cluster where I can some backups too, if I would like that. And in my local cluster, so I have two SimpliVity nodes. They are based on the DL380 Gen 10 Classic model with the accelerator card. And in my remote cluster, I have the DL380 Gen 10 G models, so the software optimized models. What else can I show here? So on my cluster, also here is a plugin active. If you go, for instance, to the monitor section, and then at the bottom again, under the section SimpliVity, you will see, first of all, the performance page where you can see, the performance of how good or how bad it's going with your SimpliVity cluster on a cluster level, of course. So you can see the throughput, the IOPS, the latency of your storage data virtualization platform. Now, for me, an even more interesting page here is completely at the bottom, storage efficiency, because this is where we can see all the data stored on my cluster on those SimpliVity nodes inside my cluster, okay? And so what we see here, I'm going to enable the whiteboarding because there are some numbers that I want to keep in mind for the end of the presentation is, so here at the left at the bottom, you will see that on virtual machine data, I have in total 4.09 TB of logical data, which are VMDK files stored by VMware on the data virtualization platform on that NFS data store. Of course, SimpliVity is making backups by default. All the data on the SimpliVity data virtualization platform, there is a backup through that default backup policy. And so here you can see on local backups that there is for 9.09 TB on backup data. of my local cluster. Now, we also have that remote cluster far, far away. And so the administrator of the remote cluster, he's also sending me those remote backups. It's not that much finally. It is just 0.30 TB. Now, in total, what does that mean? That I have in my environment 13.48 TB of logical space. Right? Now, what does that mean in reality? What is really intriguing here, thanks to the always-on deduplication and compression of the SimpliVity data virtualization platform, well, all my data, all my virtual machines and backups, how much space does it use effectively on my backend? Well, apparently it is barely 0.41 TB. Okay, I'll show you in a minute how this is possible. But so my data that I have here in my demo environment only takes 0.41 TB, being 410 gig. More details about that. There's just one more number that I want to write down here for your reference, is the SimpliVity efficiency. Okay, so at this moment now, I have an efficiency of 32.7 to 1. Of course, not thanks to the virtual machines only, but of course, thanks to the backups that are stored on my cluster. So keep those numbers in mind, right? Because there's another place where you can see that SimpliVity plugin is on virtual machine level. And so what did I do for this demo? I created a 1 terabyte virtual machine called WinVM01. So that's a little bit my template that I will be using. So as you can see here in the virtual hardware specifications, so I have a C drive of 100 gig. And I have a D drive, a data drive of 900 gig. Okay, so it's a 1 TB VM, nothing special in there. When I launch the console to my virtual machine, well, you will see here that effectively Windows is taking approximately 12 gig of my C drive, and that my D drive is completely full with data. And now you're going to say, hey Bart, there is 800 gig of data. How is it possible? This is data that is not yet deduplicated, right? How is this possible that it's stored only on 410 gig on the backend on the physical SSDs? Well, as you can see, I'm not cheating. I'm not a magician, nothing special here. I'm gonna be open to you. If I open up the D drive, you will see I was a little bit lazy, and of course I did it on purpose to challenge you on this, that you understand the power of deduplication and compression. You will see that I have copied 5 or 6 image files. So I copied the Windows source files, I copied the SimpliVity source files on there, and I have also a copy of the VMware VCSA ISO image on there. So I think in total that I have somewhere around 100 gig of unique data. And everything, all that I did was just select all, copy, paste, 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 paste. So I duplicated that data. As you can see, there's a lot of copy of copy of copy of copy of copy. And that's a nice thing about SimpliVity, right? SimpliVity says this is duplicate data. I'm not gonna store it again. I'm only gonna store unique data. So this is one of the reasons why it is possible that you store a 1 terabyte VM only on 410 gig of effective data. Yeah, and so that's the nice thing. If you have 20 VMs with all the C drives, say C, Windows, Program File System 32, well, as long as it's the same Windows operating system, of course, you know how much space that it will take on your SimpliVity environment. Okay? So now what are we gonna do? Of course, when I right click on that Windows virtual machine, well, you will see back again the SimpliVity plugin in action. So you can see now on the VM level, I can make a backup, I can clone it, I can move it to another cluster, I can set the backup policy. So if I want more or less backup specifically for that virtual machine, so you can up to the virtual machine level, you can set that backup policy. And of course you can search backups as well if you want to do a restore of that machine. Now, first of all, because I'm wanna use or maybe even abuse my virtual machine, what I'm gonna do for my demo, I'm gonna clone this virtual machine, and so I'm gonna call it Bart VM01. Just gotta have a name right. I hit next, Then it asked me for the clone method. Is it crash consistent? Or maybe you want, if there's a database running on it, maybe, then you can use VMware snapshotting or the VSS, Microsoft VSS integration to have an application consistent snapshot. Now, at that moment, of course, for this demo, there's no database running on it. I just hit finish. And so now, I'm going to ask you, how long does it take to copy a 1 terabyte virtual machine on your traditional storage with your compute connected through a high-speed network? 1 cup of coffee? 2 cups of coffee? Well, let me know, right? But nevertheless, on SimpliVity, if you take a good look here in the task pane, well, that clone job finished in 72 milliseconds, and he registered that virtual machine for you already. So if you take a look here now, you will see that BART VM01 virtual machine. It's already there with 1 terabyte of data. So I can show it to you. I can power on this VM, right? How long does it take to power on a Windows virtual machine? I can open up my Windows console and I can log on to this machine, and I can show you that 900 gigabyte of effective data that is being cloned in a very fast way, because it happened actually in less than 1 minute. It is, how long did it take? Few hundred milliseconds, right? Including the power on of my virtual machine. So there you go. You can see here that that D drive with all that data, that BART VM01 is there with that 1 terabyte of data virtual machine. Okay, so now what are we gonna do? We're gonna abuse a little bit this virtual machine. Let's say that my data got encrypted. There was a user that deleted data on purpose, yes or no. All my data got encrypted. Now what I can do is I can delete a few files. No, we're gonna delete it effectively. Now before we're gonna do a delete of data, of course, I need to make a backup. Well, what do I need to do to make a backup? Right-click operations, you go to all HPE SimpliVity actions, and then you're going to make a backup of your virtual machine. Now, since this is a manual backup, so this is not through a backup policy and automated backup, of course, to be able to do a restore, to find back in that long list of backups, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a first backup. Why do I call it a first backup? Probably you're making a backup with in the weekend a full backup and then a differential, incremental, synthetic, full, reverse, whatever, something backup during the work days during the week, right? Now, the first backup of that virtual machine, since it's a new virtual machine, that first backup is always a full backup, of course, right? So I'm gonna ask you again, how long does it take to make a full backup of a 1 terabyte virtual machine on your current traditional backup application? Again, 1, 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee. I don't know. It depends, of course, of which solution that you have. But if you take a look now in SimpliVity Backup, I have to give it a name. I can select here which cluster. So you want to make a backup in the local cluster here, or in the remote cluster far, far away somewhere. And even since there was an announcement last year with 4.0 software, we can also make a backup to an HPE Store Once appliance. So we can even have now backups outside the SimpliVity data virtualization platform on an HPE Store Once physical or virtual appliance. And also with the latest announcement of SimpliVity OS 4.1 a few months ago, there's also HPE Cloud Volumes integration. I'm working on that. That will be a separate video where I will show you how you can move those backups to the public cloud environment. So now for this demo, what I'm going to do is I just want to make a backup here in my local cluster. I hit next. I get the question again about a crash consistent or an application consistent backup. And so I hit finish. And so now we can drink a few cups of coffee, or with SimpliVity, you will see in the task pane that that backup is already finished in 51 milliseconds. That's thanks to the data virtualization platform and how it works, right? There are other videos available on the internet that explains how this all works, but that's all thanks to the object-driven data virtualization platform that SimpliVity is using. Now, how can I prove that that backup is finished, a full backup in 51 milliseconds? This is by indeed destroying data. And so yeah, I can delete a few files, but do it in a decent way. Okay, what I want to do is I want to delete that virtual machine entirely, so I'm sure that my data is gone. Now, of course, for that, I need to power off that virtual machine first. So there you go. I powered off my BART VM01, and so now I can say delete from disk. And so now I hope that you agree that now we have a problem here, right? So my virtual machine is gone. And so what do I need to do now? Stay calm and just do that restore. Let's take a look how this works. Now, my backups are always on cluster level. Okay, so I have two nodes. My data is automatically synchronized across those two nodes for high availability, but also the backup is also on those two nodes available. Okay, so if I lose a node, even then I still have my data, but I also have my backup. Now, that's why if I want to do a restore of my virtual machine, since the virtual machine is gone, so what do I need to do? I do a right click on cluster level. And so on cluster level, now you will see under all HPE SimpliVity actions that that menu looks a little bit different. On cluster level, I can create a data store. Give me a name for the data store and the size. You hit OK, and in less than a minute, that data store is created and presented to all the nodes inside your cluster. How easy can it be? I can register external stores, I can suspend, I can resume the policy-based backups. And what I want to do here now for my demo is hit search backups. So here you get a list of all those backups. Most of them are policy-based backups, so these are those automated backups. But now you can see at the top, there is that manual backup created called BART VM01 first backup, right? Okay, I select that backup that I just created. I hit now backup actions, and now you can restore files or restore virtual machine. Now, to give you the idea of how it looks like when you hit restore files, it's quite traditional. What you might expect, you hit next, you will see the two VMDK files of 100 gig and 900 gig. You open up the VMDK file, you see now the partition of 900 gig. And when I open up the partition, now you can see all those files. Remember all those duplicate ISO images. And so now I can select a directory or a file. I hit next, and then I select the destination and I do a restore. Just like with any traditional backup application. Now, of course, I cannot restore files because my virtual machine is gone. Or imagine that your file server was completely encrypted. Well, at that moment, you're not gonna restore files. You're gonna restore that virtual machine entirely. That goes much faster, right? Well, let's take a look. So I go to backup actions. I click here, restore virtual machine. And so now, of course, you got to give the name. You see the original name, you see the original size with the original data store. And so now I can restore it as BART VM01 being the original name, or just for the demo, I can call it now BART VM01 restore. That's up to you. You can choose the name of that new virtual machine. And then finally, of course, I need to select as well on which data store that we're going to store that data. I need, of course, a data store in my local cluster. And at that moment, I just hit that restore button. And so what happens now is, now you can close this window, there's nothing that's happening here, but you see meanwhile in that task pane at the bottom that restore finished in 66 milliseconds and that he also registered that virtual machine already, because take a look at that. There is BART VM01 restore. I can power it on and I can open up the web console. And so now you see the restored virtual machine BART VM01 with the data from a few minutes ago. And so now that virtual machine is running, and if you take just 5 more seconds, you will arrive here at the login screen, and the users are able to connect to this virtual machine, your file server, with data of a few minutes ago from that backup that you created. So this proves now indeed that it's true that you can restore a 1 terabyte virtual machine in less than a minute. And believe me, I can do the demo with 2 or 3 or 4 terabyte as well. It will work within less than a minute. Now don't worry about that yellow message here about storage HA lost sync. What happens? This is because we have 2 nodes. Everything is active on the first node, and in the backend now he is synchronizing that data, that HA synchronous data, to that second node. If it will take a minute or so, and then you will see that all that data is again synchronized across the 2 nodes in my cluster. So this gives you an idea about cloning, making a backup, and doing a restore of your virtual machine. I can do the same exercise now with a remote cluster. It will be the same experience, the same performance of restoring that virtual machine on my remote cluster. Of course, there's one more thing that I need to show you at the end, is of course what happened with the storage of my cluster, because I generated new data, but I also generated new backups, of course. So let's take a look. For that, I need to go back again to my local cluster, to the monitor page, and then at the bottom to storage efficiency. And so I'm gonna bring back the whiteboarding back again. And so there you go. Initially at the start, I had 4.09 TB of data. Well, now I have 4.97 TB, which is normal because I have a new virtual machine, right? Also, I had 9 and a little bit of terabytes of local backup data. Well, now I have 10.78, so I have indeed more backups. So it also takes more logical space. However, I didn't create technically a lot of new data, because I'm honest that BART VM01 is almost a copy of that WinVM01, which was already stored on my cluster. So there's not that much unique data. So there you go. Effectively used space is still 0.41 TB. So that stayed the same. Okay. Finally, take a look at that efficiency. We started with 32.7 to 1. Well, now, thanks to that additional virtual machine and that additional backup that I created, I get now already 38.9 to 1. And it's this number that HPE says that approximately the average of customers, they will get here 52 to 1. And 1/3 of the customers, also the ones that I see, I can confirm that they can go up to 100 to 1 or even more. So this proves now the efficiency and the performance and the redundancy, the resiliency features built in the data virtualization platform of an HPE SimpliVity solution. If you think this video was useful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more upcoming videos. Also, don't forget to follow my blog bitcon.be, where I will keep posting more articles as well. See you in another video.